We'll start with a prayer, and then have some quiet time, and maybe through that time we'll have a few still come. The prayer this morning comes from the Book of Common Prayer, and it's found on page 285 if you're looking for a reference. O God, who for our redemption gave your only begotten Son to the death of the cross, and by his glorious resurrection delivered us from the power of our enemy, grant us so to die daily to sin, that we may evermore live with him in the joy of his resurrection. Through Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. Amen. So let's take a few moments. We have put aside everything you've done so far this day and a list of things you still need to do. All tend to be on our minds. So like in the past, we'll just make ourselves comfortable and close your eyes and do let's go five slow deep breaths in. So you'll breathe in slowly, hold for a moment or two, breathe out slowly. So you're breathing in, love and light, and then you're going to let go of stress and whatever's on your mind. Okay, so we'll do about 5 of those, and then we'll take about 3 minutes today in silence. Okay. Good. So how is your time at home, your daily reflection, reading your reflections, and some prayer? How is that going? Is anyone having difficulties trying to maintain at least once a day? Just to do that and to... Now, how many have found it helpful to write down some thoughts as you're doing it, or at least to underline or circle? Or is anyone journaling, like on a separate, just in there? So some are writing in. Okay. Well, let's take part of our beginning to go over a little bit of last week. So last week was letting go of hurt and disappointment. And of course, you're only reading from Sunday to Tuesday for the Tuesday class, but it continues through the week. This one here from Thursday and then Friday, I think those are good conversation pieces that maybe we can do a little bit of before we go on to this week's theme. Thursday was about letting go of resentment. Letting go of resentment. And Friday was forgiving ourselves. 2 very important, but not always easy things to do. Earlier on, it was, when we started off the series, letting go of control, that's hard enough for some people. But when it starts getting more personal, letting go of hurts and disappointments in our life, it might be hurts and disappointments, things that have been done to us or we've done to other people, or circumstances that just didn't go the way you wanted. I mean, things don't always go. Now, sometimes they don't always happen for a good reason. And, I'm always glad my parents stopped me from trying to buy a mini bike. Back in the 70s, you know what mini bikes were? They were little mini motorcycles. They fell under the need for a license because the amount of cc's or the size of the engine was just small enough that, I'm kind of glad they didn't give in to my want.
Yeah.
They were smarter than me. I think of God sometimes, who knows what we really need and don't need. And that's the difference, the wants and needs, right? But sometimes we get hurt and disappointed. I was quite disappointed for a long time, until a year later, one of my neighbors who had worked his way up to a small Yamaha motorcycle ended up crashing.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Unfortunately, he was okay, but Yeah, little awakening moment. Resentment. Resentment. I'm not going to look for hands. Okay, I won't do that because I think most people, not, there are some maybe who aren't, have had some sort of resentment, either tossed at them from other people, or are holding on to resentment that they themselves have. So my question is, how do you let go of it? It's easy to say, eh? Let go of it. How do you do that? How do you do that? So I'm just going to open that up. And if anyone's had experience, and maybe you've worked through, and if you have, where everything that we share here can be a teaching moment for someone else, whether it's someone currently sitting here or someone watching the video after the fact. How do you let go of resentments? Has anyone ever been able to do that successfully that you can share? Judy?
This is something that I have taught some others.
Forgot about that.
This is something that I've taught some others in different groups. I came across it in a book by Martin Kelsey, and he suggests that if there is someone who is causing you issues, or you need to forgive them for whatever reason, is to say the Lord's Prayer, but using that person's name. So, for example, if the person who has offended you, whose name is John, you pray, John's Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name in John. Thy kingdom come in John, thy will be done through John, on earth as if he were here in heaven. And it goes on. And if you keep doing that, realizing that this person who has offended you or hurt you in any way is still a child of God, can be very helpful.
Jenny? Sure.
Yeah, mine, our father deserted us when we were little, so there was anger, and I used to think, oh, what would I be doing now if he would have stayed with us? Maybe I could have gone to college, yada, yada, yada. And one time when I was praying, it like bolt hit me and said, you have to forgive him or you're not going to go to heaven. I was Catholic then, Roman Catholic. So it just hit me, and I thought, yes, I do have to forgive him. So then I just started praying, Lord, help me forgive him. And then again, one day, it was gone. And I'm glad everything happened the way it did, because I wouldn't be here today, maybe. I wouldn't have Chris, wouldn't have our son, and all of you, so it worked out. God worked it out.
Fantastic. Oh, well, here, I'll pass it. Helps to have this for the video purposes.
I try to think of what the other person's life is like and figure out somehow why they would do what they did.
Anyone else want to comment? Well, thank you, and Judy, thank you for sharing one way, like a how. How do you start doing that?
If anyone wants a copy of that,
Yeah.
I can get them.
But it's hard to, it is hard to let go. It is hard to let go at times. People have been abused or done wrong in some way. It's hard to let go of some of that and to forgive, because those go hand in hand. Letting go of resentment may in many cases involve forgiving, and it's hard. But sometimes we need to just let let God deal with it. Because it drains us. It drains us. And I've seen what it does to people. It's, even though this is last week's topic, it deals with health of mind, body, soul. You know, when we are deep into resentment, it can eat away at us like decay. So letting go. You know. Okay. Anything else from last week's discussion or any of the other day? You have your booklets. Is there anything that you have underlined on any of the days that you would like to share for a few more minutes before we move on? Anything? Any words? Oops, again.
It's not about me, but I have two close friends that their now ex-husbands were unbelievably horrible, and for a long time they were resentful, and it affected their life with everybody else. And somewhere along the line, one was a church goer, the other one wasn't. They decided to forgive the ex, and their whole lives changed, and they found happiness with someone else, went on, and it was really a real experience for me. And I have a little plaque on my kitchen windowsill that I see, and it says, God gives the best to those who leave the choice to Him. And that, I find, is refreshing and helpful.
Thank you. One last thing I wanted to touch on about letting go of hurt and disappointment. The death of a friend, a companion, a spouse can sometimes bring out a lot of resentment. Why did you leave me? Why are you making me suffer? And then the terrible guilt that they feel that way. Does anyone know anyone who's maybe gone through those stages? Or a spouse who dies and never shared how to do the finances, how to do anything around the household. Or the other side, maybe it's the case of the wife dies and the husband is left, doesn't know how to take care of anything around the house, how to cook, how to do anything, how to shop. It goes both ways. But despair can sometimes bring out anger. I mean, that's part of this, some of the stages of grieving. But there are sometimes people who actually resent that someone has passed on. And that they have to then work through that and really forgive themselves for thinking that way. So there's many different examples of what we need to let go in terms of hurts and disappointments. And some of the hardest things are letting go of someone we love, however that has come about. Any comments on that at all? Any comments? Okay. Well, this week it's about letting go to enhance our health and well-being. And I was just wondering, is anyone ever concerned about their own health?
I think we all take turns.
We all take turns, right?
Mine comes up more frequently though.
Yeah.
Well, interesting, the comment on Monday from yesterday, beginning of the page, 37. It's a quote from someone named Edward Thompson. Of what do we need to let go? what might we need to let go of today in order to protect and nurture the health of our heart, soul, mind, and body. So this week, as you go through the daily reflections, we're going to be encountering that. And it's going to be broken up into those 4 quadrants of heart, soul, mind, strength. And there's various things that fall into those sort of quadrants that we may need to consider to let go of to help bring about more health and well-being to ourselves. Scott Stoner says on page 37, knowing when to hold on to and when to let go of ideas, plans, relationships, ways of dealing with stress, and many other things in our lives is essential to our overall sense of well-being. Letting go too soon may lead to regret, or may lead to us miss an opportunity for growth. On the other hand, holding on too long may cause unnecessary suffering. What I'd like you to do is break into groups and take a look at that paragraph. So that's on page 37. It's right before the Making It Personal section of the reflection. And I'd like you to read that over again, read it over yourself, and then in your groups discuss that. So discuss that about knowing when to hold and when to let go. And earlier on, I saw it. Oh yeah, on the Sunday, the Kenny Rogers song, know when to hold him and know when to fold him.
Yes,
Right?
know when to walk away.
And when to walk
And
away.
when to run.
But isn't that, and that's part of life,
Yeah.
right? So what do we need to hold on to? What do we need to let go? And how do we know when the time is right for either? So break into some groups. Maybe, if you wanted to be, did you want to just be one, or do you want to join behind you with Doris, Eva? Yeah, sure. And let's take about 15 minutes, 10 minutes for sure, and look at that comment from Scott Stoner and talk about that. And what would be nice is if we could come back and talk about it. So maybe at each table, could someone take a note or two, and then we'll share it as an open session. Thank you. On Sunday, we had the gospel reading from Luke chapter 13, verses 1 to 9. And I focused, as you know, on the beginning part of the gospel, dealing with the whole idea of sin and stuff that happens to people, and is there a correlation or not? The last part about the fig tree, I didn't focus on just because it's a little different focus, but it's part of today and this week's readings. So I'm going to read just that part of the parable because it addresses the whole idea of what to keep and what to let go of. And that's exactly what's happening with the fig tree. So this is from Luke chapter 13. Then he told this parable. A man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came looking for fruit on it and found none. So he said to the gardener, "See here, for 3 years I have come looking for fruit on this fig tree, and still I find none. Cut it down. Why should it be wasting the soil?" He replied, "Sir, let it alone for 1 more year until I dig around it and put manure on it. If it bears fruit next year, well and good. But if not, you can cut it down." So the whole question about what do you do with the fig tree, right? It's been there for 3 years. I mean, it's also interesting that the fig tree's in a vineyard.
Yeah.
Now, we could go on and talk about a whole bunch of little images in this parable, but I'm going to just focus specifically on the part about when do we give up on something, or when do we need to continue putting energy into something? So when is it a positive thing? How do you know when it's time, when time's up? It's like, you know, that what's that cliche, flogging a dead horse? You
Yeah.
know? Churches do a lot of that. No, they do. Churches will focus on something that needs to be tossed out. All, but not just churches, organizations as a
Yes.
whole. Organizations, any groupings, you know, Rotary Club, you know, Scouts, whatever group. Sometimes you need to evaluate what you need to hold on to. And I think I've talked about before that COVID's been good for that. When we couldn't do things, it's allowed time to step back and say, okay, what do we need to hold on to? Or what do we need to let go of? The image of the fig tree, what speaks to you in that parable? And again, we could go into so many directions in that parable.
I think that the one who wanted to give it more time, was tending and loving it and caring for it. And I think that has a lot to do with when something can go right, and when you can hold on, when you have that to give. And sometimes don't see anything result from it for a while. But I think that's, if you don't have that, you may as well let it go.
And the interesting thing is, at least the one who was tending to the fig tree was resolved to the fact that if it doesn't produce after at least one more year, okay, then do what you want with it. But some people, it's hard to let go even when something is not doing well. It's not living, it's not thriving, it's not producing fruit, whatever that might mean. Any other comments on the parable? Because it relates to our whole theme of letting go. When you hold on to something, when you let go of something.
I think just to echo what I think in terms of the owner was looking for a product, a result, and the gardener was into process. And that's very much like what Bobby said. When I read that parable, the other parable that I think of is Christ going after or Jesus, or the shepherd going after the lost sheep. And, you know, all the 99 can fend for themselves, but you pay attention to that one who was lost. And so that's the other side of the coin where you're not willing to give up on something. So you have your choices.
And it does depend on the person. Some others would say, you know what, I'm not going to waste my time with that one sheep. I got the 99 to take care of. We're going to continue on, and whatever will be, will be. But that's not the nature of God, right? So what needs to be let go in terms of our theme this week of enhancing our health and well-being? When you think of your overall state of health, physical health, emotional health, spiritual health, do you see any relation between your health and those various parts of who you are, what makes you whole? Christy was talking about wholeness, you know. Is there anything related, any connection between what you hold on to that affects your emotional state, your spiritual state, your physical state? Is there something? Would anyone like to share anything at all? that maybe you see as or as an opportunity? So you could flip it around, right? The 99 versus the one sheep.
Yeah.
What's the opportunities that you may see in your current life, moment in life, your state? And is there something positive that you see can make a difference in your life that you've been thinking of doing? Do you know what I mean? Like, is there something on the positive side that would be of a benefit to you, that would help nurture your mind, nurture your spirit? Is there anything? I'd like to hope this class is one of them. Anybody?
Look, nobody else is going to say anything.
Yeah, we'll go.
A year or so ago, I was feeling, I'd say, pretty depressed. It just felt as though I was kind of cruising, and I wasn't really using my gifts as a priest. And I wasn't sure where that was going, but it certainly wasn't going up. And then I got a call from the senior warden at my former church, St. Peter's in Casa Grande. And their vicar had just left, and they were relying on supply priests. And things weren't going well. And she called me to see if there was any way that I could fill in a couple Sundays. Well, I ended up doing every other Sunday from last September to the end of the year. And then from the beginning of February going forward, I'm doing 3 Sundays a month up there and all of Holy Week. And although it's a lot of physical work and a lot of activity, putting together services and all of that, I feel so much more energized because I feel as though I'm being who I'm called to be. And that has been sort of a revelation to me, because I was thinking in terms of, I have all this work to do, I'm going to be exhausted.
Right.
And instead, when it's something that really feeds you, you have energy from that.
Right. So it enhances your self-well-being and self-worth. It raises your spirits. It has, even though it was a lot of work, it had a positive effect on you. So that's the other side of it when I was talking about the positive. It's not always about letting go of something, but sometimes it's something extra that makes a difference in your life. Hearing what Judy just mentioned, could anyone relate to that? Would you like to share maybe a story from your own life? Oh, Donna? Thank you. We do want to also focus on the positives too.
Yes, I moved to Arizona about a year ago, and every month I tell myself, I need to get back to the classroom. I mean, so desperate for subs, especially in high school. And I feel the same thing. It scares me, because, oh my gosh, I haven't done that much work in so long. But I know it will enrich me on so many levels.
Thank you. Now, out of your discussions that you had in your groups, I know there was some really good discussions going on. Can you share something or one point from your discussions you had just a few minutes ago?
I'll give a very abbreviated version of my story. I was talking about it at the time when things were not going well at work, and it was a very bad situation that was affecting my health. And I was called to jury duty, and I prayed before I went that for direction from God, that He would tell me through a word from a lawyer or a judge or a juror, should I stay and ride this out and maybe learn a lesson from it? Or should I walk out not having any other income, step out in faith that you will take care of me and provide for me? And when I got there, when I was in lines, I heard somebody call my name behind me, and I turned around, and it was a psychologist I used to work with. And we went out to lunch, and I told her a little bit about what was going on, and by then I forgot about my prayer. And she told me 3 times, Julie, you have to leave. And so it was direct. It was not a hint. It was direct from a licensed clinical psychologist. Julie, you have to leave. When I got home, I thought about it, and I realized I got my answer. And it took me another week or so to get up the courage to leave, but I did, and things worked out very well after that.
So the whole thing about when do you let go, like stop holding something, it helps, or at least it gives us the ability to change direction and to let go when, in that case, you were told it's time that you got to go. Having a spiritual director, I mentioned that before, can be a very positive thing in one's life too, because the spiritual director can be very clear and sometimes very blunt. Say, you need to let go of this, you need to do this, you need to try that. Anything else from the other groups? Second, Connie?
Well, we all mentioned the fact that we've all met what I call just negative people. And they really drain energy from you. And what we discussed is, how do you finally decide you just have to let it go? And I mean, let go of that person. And in my own case, I feel if someone is, very negative, and you're trying to help them through an event or a situation, something that you have to really dig in and help them. I get that. But if someone just by their nature, like their whole life is negative, I found, because this happened to me when we moved here, I was trying to make so many friends, in a new place and stuff. And I met this woman, and we would go out for lunch, and oh my God, nothing was ever. But, she could relate events from one childhood, so her whole life had been a disappointment. And I would go home, and I am, for those that know me, I'm pretty cheerful. I'm an optimistic person. And so I would grump around the house for a few hours and relate to my husband all of her issues, and he's like, I've got to go to the office. And so I realized after a few
Well, that says
months,
something.
well, he'd be gone. And I realized she was dragging me down, and I finally made the decision that if her unhappiness, her negativity ruined my whole day, life is too short, and I let her go. And I feel bad, but I realized I can't make her life better.
Right.
She has spent 72 years being miserable. There's nothing I can do. It was not like one event.
Yeah.
Just curious, and this one you could do a show of hands. Has anyone ever known someone that is so negative, like exactly what Tommy was talking about? Put up your hand. Who has known someone like that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now, on the other side, who has known someone that is very positive and is uplifting to be around? Put up your hands.
Oh, yeah.
Oh. I'm glad it's almost the same, because it would be a very sad state if all you ever knew was negative people.
Well, out of our discussion also, and Nelson had joined us, and we talked about boundaries. And although it's almost counter to the message of Christianity, you have to love everybody. But for your own mental and spiritual self-help, you need to set boundaries.
Right. And setting boundaries, and that is part of the question here, what needs to be let go to protect and to nurture your health, your heart, soul, mind, and body. And sometimes it's letting go of certain people. Sometimes you gotta do that. Because if people are dragging you down and you come away grumbling after, especially if that's not your own nature, then there's a problem.
It's hard.
But what tends to be the nature of the happy people who are dealing with the negative people, the happier people try to fix the other person. And that doesn't always work.
No.
It doesn't work in friendships, it doesn't always work in personal relationships either. However, there are those moments, and sometimes it happens, then they're God moments, you may find out why that person is negative. Some people just seem negative, like who, for whatever reason. But you may discover there's been a pain or a hurt, and that God might put you into a situation and you got to deal with all that stuff. But you might be the one who helps them walk through it. But maybe not, and it might be just sometimes you just got to, like I said, 72 years of negativity. But it started somewhere. That's the whole thing. It did start somewhere. But we don't need to be doormats either. There comes a time that we need to just walk away. You're going to say something?
What it just reminded me of an incident. We had friends, and she tends to be very negative, and they came over, and the husband and wife were fighting, and just, it was horrible. George and I were just happy as clams. There was no problem. They left, they were happy, George and I were fighting.
You took it off.
And from that point on, I took a step back from my friend and did not, didn't let her into her negativity to bring me down.
Right.
But I thought that was kind of funny that, started out one way and ended up another. But we resolved it before we went to bed, so that was good.
Well, this morning's, or today's reflection, those who have already done it, now some of you, it might be evening when you read the reflection of the day, so you may not have read it yet. But Scott Stoner, for today, he's talking about letting go with all your heart. He's quoting a sort of a paraphrased version of Philippians 2:14-15, and it's written from the Message, the Message Bible. It's very paraphrased, modern.
Yeah.
Would someone like to read that? Right at the top of the page, underneath the title. Bobby? Oh, just a second. Just again for video's sake.
Do everything readily and cheerfully. No bickering, no second guessing allowed. Go out into the world uncorrupted, a breath of fresh air in this squalid and polluted society. Provide people with a glimpse of good living and of the living God.
Thank you. Well, interesting. Right at the bottom of the page, Scott Stoner was saying that the passage that was just read by Bobby, how does it speak to you? How does it speak to you? And we know about other people complaining, right? But it's interesting, he said, are you aware of a relationship in your life that might be suffering because of your complaining? Your complaining. It's a harder one.
Yeah.
Part of it might also come about from we don't always recognize that we're complaining.
Yeah.
I see laughing. I've learned when people laugh like that they know exactly what's going on. So I'm going to pass it over to Ginny because she's really laughing.
I was actually laughing at Judy, because Judy made a comment. So,
Okay.
And I said, it's because we're always right.
Amen.
Right. Okay. Is there... Are you willing to let go of complaining? Is the challenge for today's reflection.
Right.
Are you willing to try letting go of complaining for the next 24 hours? Sure. What was that? Okay.
I said, well, I would have, but I started the day before I read this.
Oh.
Can't be today.
Well, you can start now.
That's a complaint.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Okay, you're on the clock now. 1, 2, go. Oh, I guess we all fall into it. There's this sense of negative around us. It's not just people. I mean, turn on the TV. Everything seems to focus on more on the negative because that's what sells newspapers. That's what sells books. That's what sells whatever.
It's perspective.
Perspective?
How can we complain when we see what's going on in Ukraine?
Well, right.
I mean, in all seriousness, it's putting it into context.
Putting it into a context.
And
Right. Right. So people complain about gas going up $1 a gallon. Put it into the context about what about the people who lost everything and maybe even loved ones. Relentless, vicious violence. So yeah. But complaining or that negative side. Because again, when we focus on negative, when we might be perceived as that type of person, it affects others around us and ultimately affects us too. Because then you're almost like constantly chewing on whether it's bitterness or something that's kind of just like, How does it affect our health? Right? How does it affect us? Sorry, Eva?
You don't sleep as well.
Okay, yeah, you don't sleep as well, absolutely,
And that affects your health.
right? So when you don't sleep well, it affects your health. Other ways that, say, a negativity can affect, whether it's from someone else or whether it's something you're kind of like chewing on and kind of
Lead you into depression.
leads you into depression. Leads you into depression. What does it do to, what about stress? Can you develop or worsen stress in your life when you're kind of always like negative or angry or on the edge, or can it do that? Does it?
Yes.
You know? So it affects all those areas. It could affect your heart. Your blood pressure goes up. Who knows what could happen. Your soul. When you're negative, or if you end up going into a depression, you end up your connection with the beauty of creation and God gets clouded. A barrier sort of starts building up, and spiritually we start becoming unhealthy. And of course our mind, well, when our mind's going, yes, we don't sleep, we're thinking of things maybe that aren't always good, and it does affect us. So as we continue through the week, and we're already done, as we continue through the week, you're going to see more topics such as letting go with all your soul, letting go with all your strength, letting go with all your mind. And it'll focus on different aspects of our health, like how letting go of certain parts are so important to our own well-being and our spiritual health and our physical health. So continue to do that. Next week, again, we'll start off with anything that came out of the days that we were still to read, or even out of today's session. And then we'll continue on to the next week's theme. And the next week's theme, and I just got to pull it up here, is letting go in love. Letting go in love. And that'll start Sunday, right? Sunday and beyond. So let's finish off with a prayer. And if anyone wants to stay after and talk for a few minutes, then I'll be around if you'd like to talk. So the closing prayer comes out of Luke 10, verse 27. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. Amen.
Amen.